I was really fortunate, for a million and one reasons. I ended up in Mexico, and I had just come from Los Angeles. And at that time, bands like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue were exploding. So you had that Motley Crue, more hair band style at that time. And then you had Guns N' Roses. It was much more street level looking, cultural wise, just the more biker looking, so to speak. And I was in the middle of that because at that time as well, the Anne Rice books, Interview with the Vampire and all that stuff came out. And they were reissued and they caught on with the Hollywood crowd. This was late 80s, I think, mid to late 80s. And I was right in the middle of all of that. And, the Lost Boys and all that kind of stuff. And there was a band, but it was kind of like a brotherhood. It was, Hollywood Vampires. And, now it's more of a band, right? With Alice Cooper, I guess, and Johnny Depp and Joe Perry and I forget who else. But we all kind of had the logo on our jackets or whatever. So when I got to Los Angeles, I went to Mexico. And when I was kind of being discovered, I was kind of in the parking lot of the Arena Mexico. And I thought it was like a gymnasium. I wanted to go shower and work out. I had no idea that it was actually the Arena Mexico and what it stood for. So when I was talking to them in the parking lot, they, I had long purple hair and the tattoos and all that kind of stuff. And I was super, super white and skinny and tall, like a vampire, that kind of thing. And when he said, "Where are you from?" And I Canada. And what is it? Why do you like vampires so much? Because you saw the back of my jacket, and I told him, and then he said, "You're the Canadian vampire," and that's how that kind of happened. And the wrestling community took it as a joke, and it was treated as a joke. It was like that because it had nothing to do with wrestling. I had no clue, and. By 3 or 4 matches, the culture instantly changed because the government didn't let bands like foreign bands like Metallica or U2, you couldn't go to you just couldn't. And the television was really censored and controlled. So MTV wasn't allowed on the air. When things started to change, they let MTV on the air, and then all of a sudden they let American bands or foreign bands come to Mexico. So there was a explosion of culture, and at the same time they needed content on TV. So pro wrestling was a phenomenon. When I got there, I was the first one with the rock and roll look. I had nothing to do with everybody else, and within 2 to 3 weeks, the arena went from about 2% women to 90% women. It was more like a boy band thing. It was nothing to do with sports. But I followed a philosophy they gave me. They said, the moment you learn to wrestle, your career is over. Because if you have women screaming, and it was you can find it, I don't want to say it, but it was something else. It was real rock starish. So when all that happened, they gave me a videotape of a very famous Mexican actor who had, in the golden age of cinema, was the biggest star in the history of cinema for Latinos. He perished in a plane crash and all that, kind of like James Dean. Now he's like that urban legend down there. And the idea for me to watch one of his movies was he suffers, he sells, he suffers, always bad luck. And at the end, he sings and gets the girl and go away. And they said, you have to suffer. Just so. And at the end, even you're never going to win. You win by disqualification or something like that. Because the people are wanting you to be this hero for them because you look like them and the girls are mental for you. So that lasted 40 years because when I came in, the fathers and mothers who had, they became their children and children. So I have like 4 generations of knowing the culture and living with the people. But so now if I wrestled in Mexico, it's the fans that were there in the 90s come with their kids and stuff. And it's become something that I have no idea. I never knew what the hell it meant, but it's even worse now. But back then, it was so insane. It was, and like usually things go like 6 or 7 months like that. This went at least 9 years. It was like, wow. And that was kind of, all of that was kind of like that, wrestling 6 times a day, 6 days a week. And then on the 7th day, wrestling 10 times. There was that much work in Mexico, and the character was in that much demand. So it was once in a life. I don't see that ever happening again or at least not in my lifetime in any territory, because the territories aren't hot anymore because of the internet. So I had a hell of a life. It was awesome. Sorry for the long answer, but it's a big history.
It's all good. What are some of your favorite feuds from your time in Mexico?
I never had a favorite feud. I never really had feuds. I had a couple of opponents that there was a little bit of history from because of the heat we had on TV. But I was very fortunate. It didn't matter they actually wouldn't take the stars of the company. They didn't need it. Vampiro drew so many people, you can put him against the local heel. So it wasn't really, Mexico's different. They don't really care about the feuds. They care about, if you're hot with the public, that draws. It's a different philosophy. So I kind of lived it that way.
All right. You also went to Japan in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
How did you adjust to the style over there?
I was such a fan. I studied Japanese wrestling videotapes at least 2 hours a day, every single day. I'm the great Muda. I'm a mark for him, and I emulated him. I idolized him. I loved the Japanese. It's just, to me, it was so awesome. I didn't, I was never a fan of WWE, for example, but All Japan and New Japan, just that warrior martial arts attitude. That's my thing. The kicks, the high kicks, the hard shots. I absolutely adored that. So I prepared just by studying and studying and studying. Yeah. I fucked up the first time. I looked like an idiot, but at least I went.
What do you think led to that that love of that warrior style?
Because one of the only memories I have with my dad is going to see Bruce Lee when the Bruce Lee movies came out in the early 70s. And I mean, when you're a kid and you see Bruce Lee, and because there's nothing, there's only 2 TV channels. There's no, so it's either comic books or what? And then all of a sudden, the Bruce Lee on screen with the punches, the kicks, the screaming, the body. I was like, what the? So that kind of was born from that. Like I was like 3 or 4 years old, and it's been in my liking ever since. And then I got into martial arts, and because of that style of fighting, and it's kind of like the American wrestling. If I had it doesn't do it for me. I like American indie wrestling, but I don't like the organizations at all. They probably don't like me. I'm not being offensive, but I'm just trying to say my personal liking was the seriousness of Japan.
TitleMatchNetwork.com